Hey everyone, this is Nick and welcome back to your Linux and open source news show. This week we've got some interesting stuff. First, Linus Torvalds finally talked about AI, how it views it, and specifically the problem of slop reports making Linux security worse instead of making it easier. We also have more Adobe products running on Linux thanks to Wine, which seems to be a trend that we'll look at, and also we have some big web browser redesigns already in place or coming really soon, plus some big changes for Fedora, specifically ditching the Deepin Desktop due to some security concerns, and a bunch of other things. As usual, all the sources I used are down in the description, and we also have a message from our sponsor, Proton Pass. So this video is sponsored by Proton Pass. This is the password manager I personally use on all web browsers and on my phone. They are your usual password manager, except they are fully encrypted, meaning even Proton employees can never access your passwords. You have integrated two-factor authentication options in there if you don't want to use a specific application. You can securely share specific vaults containing multiple passwords with other people. You also have options to automatically create email aliases using Proton Mail to hide your email address when you create a new login. You can also share single passwords. You have unlimited passwords even with the free account. Proton Pass even lets you upload specific important documents to your vault so you can find them back again, get them synced between devices, and have them securely protected. And you can also get notifications when your passwords get hacked. You can also create passkeys if you want to use that. You have basically all the options that you would expect integrated in your Proton account, which starts for free, giving you access to all the suite of Proton tools. And of course, they have paid plans that give you access to even more features. Proton Pass is the password manager I use. The link, as usual, is down in the description. Check them out, they're really good. Okay, so let's begin with Linus Torvalds' stance on AI. He specifically talked about the issue of AI-reported security bugs. He said that the flood of AI reports made their security list almost unmanageable. The security list being a private list where people can report specific problems with Linux security instead of just discussing it publicly, because obviously this could lead to attackers exploiting these flaws before they are patched. So on AI, Torvalds said that AI tools are great. They are tools, they can be used, and they can be really helpful. But only if they actually help, not if they create make-believe work and also cause unnecessary pain, which is what he says this is currently doing, specifically on the security side. He told people to use AI, but in a productive way, which basically amounts to do some actual human work on top of what the AI generated. He also said that to add value to the work that AI did, you really need to read the documentation first. You need to write a patch to fix the bug that your AI tool found. You can't just submit the report and hope somebody else will deal with it. Basically, you need to do something more than what the AI did, because everyone can do what you just did with your AI tool, because everyone has access to it. Torvalds also said that there is enormous duplication of effort due to these AI tools, because people run the exact same LLMs, find the exact same problems, and then jump onto the security list to report it, where they can't really read if someone else has already reported it, meaning tons of bugs are reported multiple times. And so for people who are handling all of this work, well, basically their job turns into sending the thing to the right person and answering saying, hey, this is already fixed or this is already reported, which is absolutely not a productive use of people's time. Torvalds said that this is pointless effort. He said that bugs found by AI are by definition not secret, because anyone could have used the same LLM and found it. So they do not belong in the private security list. Reporting them there makes duplication worse, because of course no one else can see what has been done here. So Torvalds' stance on those AI tools, specifically for security, but also in general, is that yes, these are tools, use them if they help you do good work. But don't just regurgitate what the AI told you, do some actual work on top of it. What the AI creates is the starting point of the work, not the actual finished work. And so to deal with these specific issues, they decided to make a few changes to the kernel documentation to address the barrage of AI slop reports. This is an entire process that clarifies what qualifies as a security bug, what is a vulnerability, what isn't a vulnerability, and what should be handled in the regular development process as a regular bug. The general idea is that most security-related bugs should just be handled as a day-to-day bug fix, so in public, to get more reviews and thus better fixes. The actual security list is used for high-risk vulnerabilities and that alone, stuff that can affect a lot of users and can lead to privilege escalation. So the documentation also addresses AI-generated reports directly. It states that these issues should be discussed publicly because they haven't been discovered by an ingenious human doing their own testing. Anyone could have done the same stuff. They obviously state that the exploit that can be used or the proof of concept should not be shared publicly. That would be super dumb. The idea is to have people confirm that yes, there is an exploit in a specific part of the kernel, confirm how it works privately on the request from the maintainers of these affected systems. There are also guidelines for the quality of these automatically submitted reports or AI-assisted reports, specifically to use concise, plain text, no markdown, stating the key elements in the beginning of the report so things can be assessed quickly by maintainers. The report should describe all the actually verified impacts, not what could potentially happen, so facts before speculation. All of this needs to be tested before submitting, and you need to confirm the reproducibility of the issue. If possible, you should also develop and propose a fix to patch that problem. And to complete that, there's an entirely new threat model which lists what considers a vulnerability and what doesn't. Now, this is good stuff. It won't fix the problem. Some people will just keep submitting their AI slop without any actual work done on top of it. It is unavoidable. Some people are really certain that they're helping when they do this, even though you told them repeatedly that this is actually not helping at all and creating more work for others. But having those guidelines actually gives you good grounds to reject stuff without any specific explanation. You can just say, doesn't conform to guidelines, boom, you're booted. You don't have to discuss it further because actually the guidelines told you that's what you should have done and you didn't do it. Most major open source projects will probably have to have the same kind of guidelines in place at some point if they don't want to be spammed by that kind of stuff. Now, the Adobe on Linux story keeps getting better because after Photoshop was enabled using Wine, it is now Lightroom's turn. This, of course, works through Wine, and apparently most of it has been developed using AI. Now, this is a lot of hacky work. You will need to patch some DLLs and add some stub DLL files, but in the end, the application runs and works, including Cloud Sync and GPU acceleration, although not everything is fully GPU accelerated, and there will be crashes with certain dialogues, because it is Wine and it is absolutely early days, and it was all coded using AI. But at least Lightroom is usable now on Linux. Lightroom CC, the latest version, so you can get your project fixed, a little touch-up, modifying something quickly for a client, without having to dual boot back into Windows, for example. All you'll need is the project's code from GitHub, you'll need Vulkan drivers because it works using DXVK, you'll need Ming to build some additional DLLs, and you'll need Wine Staging 11.8 or newer. The rest is all packaged through a script that does things automatically for you. Of course, you should double or triple check that script to see that it doesn't do anything untoward onto your system, because again, it was written with AI. It has been confirmed to work, but it doesn't mean it's not doing some weird stuff. And so yes, this entire thing was done using Claude, and Claude alone. The assistant apparently read crash dumps and logs, automatically patched the DLLs, verified that stuff worked by taking screenshots, and documented the entire development process. And honestly, that is one cool use case for AI. If a company or an individual can just ask an AI to make something work using Wine and get the program to actually run, even though it means creating some fake DLLs and patching existing ones, then it's good. It is a hacky basis for work, and then it will probably need to be stabilized if we want that to be included in the real version of Wine so everyone can benefit without a hacky script. But it does give good grounds for companies to check that, hey, you know what? Actually, it's not that hard to get Linux support and proper Linux support. We can now package this script, this version of Wine, these specific DLLs, and we can support the application on Linux specifically without having to hire 10 developers to actually maintain it over time. I think that's good stuff. I think that can actually be useful. It can bring more apps to Linux, even though not in the best way possible, and I think that's a positive. Now we have some big web browser redesigns coming or already released. The first one is Vivaldi, which I know it's not fully open source, but it is still a popular browser. Vivaldi has a brand new look in version 8.0. This is what they call their unified design, with rounded corners around the web page itself and fewer boundaries and lines and separation between UI elements. So you have a simpler, more legible interface. Basically what they did is they just unified the AI as a continuous frame all around the web page, with no specific frames being drawn around the toolbar, around the URL bar, around the tabs or whatever. It just looks a little bit slicker. They also have a new dark theme that seems applied to all elements of the UI. The older theme is still available for people who want it, apparently. They also added preset layouts to quickly change the UI from a very minimal layout that makes Vivaldi look exactly like Chrome or Chromium to a very weird tabs in the bottom kind of layout, which I'm sure some people use and love. Even if you pick one of those presets, you can still customize the entire UI, and the end result, I think, is something that looks much closer to the default Chrome or Chromium UI, and I wonder if it's intentional to limit the amount of work that they have to do on their own UI to keep up with all the patches and updates to Chromium. Now, personally, I never really clicked with Vivaldi, specifically because the interface did not look like anything else on my computer. It was very messy, it wasn't very legible, and even tweaking it to make it simpler, it just looked heavy, a little bit bloated. This new redesign seems much more along my own tastes, but it is a Chromium-based browser and it is not fully open source, so I will probably not move to it. As per the other redesign, it is for Firefox. They introduced Project Nova, which is a full rework of the UI. Everything seems touched up, from the settings and how they're split into their various categories to the actual tabs, the URL bar. It seems to be a full revamp. Everything is rounded by default because that's the current UI trend. You have pill-shaped tabs, pill-shaped highlights in the settings, and a very Proton-esque purple color by default. Seriously, it really just looks like Proton. If you look at a screenshot at a glance, it looks like something designed by the team of Proton. They also say the redesign improves the browser speed, but that's not because the browser actually got faster. They did say they gained about 9% better performance over the past year. No, the redesign makes some workflows faster. So tab groups, split view, and vertical tabs are apparently easier to access, which is not going to speed up the workflow of everyone because not everyone uses those things. They will also add a compact mode back into the browser. This used to exist previously, but was removed a few years ago. They also mentioned spacing changes, more rounded controls, updated icons, added gradients. This redesign will also arrive on mobile versions of Firefox, and you will have color themes you can apply if the default light purple is not to your liking. Firefox said that this design is still being shaped, that they will listen to the community's feedback, which I'm sure will be extremely well argumented, documented, and very well expressed. As with all redesigns, people really love to talk about this very calmly with nice, normal words. Now, jokes aside, Firefox does need a marketing boost, and I think a redesign is not a bad way to do this. Currently, I think it is still perceived as your grandpa's browser, like the thing that people used when the internet was in its infancy, and this is not the image you want currently, so a redesign doesn't make the browser faster or better than other browsers, but it does help modernize the look and maybe attract another audience, so I don't think that's a bad idea. Now let's talk about Rust in the kernel, because Koah Hartman, Torvalds' right-hand man on the Linux kernel, talked about Rust at Rust Week 2026. He basically said that using Rust could eliminate 80% of CVEs in the kernel, which is a pretty bold claim. He says the main issue with the kernel currently is untrusted data that flows from user space to the kernel. In doing so, you lose the context of the data, the origin, and thus it is harder to check what that data wants to do. He also said that the kernel was designed assuming the hardware that it manages is fully trustworthy, which is no longer really the case. You have many, for example, bad USB devices in the world. So why would Rust be helpful for that? Well, it handles checking for error return values at compilation, and it also checks for releasing locks, which are two common sources of CVEs in the kernel. So even if developers forgot to work on that, it is solved when using Rust automatically. Second, just working with a new language that plugs into the existing codebase of the Linux kernel has made developers work harder on documentation, and it made them rethink their APIs, which obviously can lead to some security improvements too. Now, of course, moving to Rust for more parts of the kernel is not a silver bullet. It alleviates some common problems, but it doesn't fix everything. You still need to double check, and you can still introduce vulnerabilities when you write using Rust. And of course, there is also some more work needed to better integrate Rust in all the parts of the Linux kernel, and Koah Hartman actually wants more of that. He actually called for more Rust developers in the kernel because he wants that to happen. You can say goodbye to the Deepin Desktop on Fedora because they are removing packages for this from their repos. Concerns were raised about a year ago to conduct a deeper security analysis on the Deepin Desktop and its packages. This came after OpenSUSE maintainers had raised the same concerns about those packages. OpenSUSE identified some security problems in these packages that bypassed the SUSE review process. When you installed the Deepin Desktop, you had to agree to a license terms or license agreement in the terminal, and if you agreed to it, this automatically installed some content, some additional stuff from Deepin that was not vetted by open source, and apparently the Deepin Desktop also relies on unsafe authentication methods, which is why OpenSUSE removed all Deepin Desktop packages from their main repos, and Fedora is now doing the exact same thing. They found that they didn't review the Deepin packages properly before, and they ignored all the various dbus and security policies that were implemented by the Deepin Desktop, which apparently weren't up to normal Linux standards, or at least Fedora standards. Apparently, communication with Deepin developers never reached a satisfactory process, and since things didn't really progress in a year, Fedora decided to also remove these packages. There's a door open to unretire them if a review passes successfully on all of the stuff these apps and packages try to do, but I doubt that this will happen soon. That is yet another reason why I don't really trust Deepin. Not only do I not like their AI, but also they've had a lot of concerns raised over the years on some telemetry being implemented without really telling anyone. Now you also have all of these security problems using deprecated or unsafe authentication methods, installing stuff in the background without relying on actual verified packages. I just don't really like the way they're handling things. If it's a problem with how they're built, they need to change how they build their stuff. They need to not bypass the actual packaging system on the distros that they use. Now, the specter of enshittification is still looming over open source. It looks like it's approaching Bitwarden this time, the famous open source password manager. They've changed leadership recently, and this came with changes that are pretty unpopular with the user base. First is the price hike. The premium plan is almost double what the actual previous cost was. The free plan still exists, but any paying customer will see their bill increase. It's only $10 a year more than it was, but that is never going to be very popular as a move. Second, the always free sentence temporarily was removed from their website. They added it back shortly. Either this was an error, maybe this was a change of direction for the project that they decided to walk back. They also removed mentions of inclusion and transparency in their messaging. They used to tout GRIT as their core values, GRIT standing for gratitude, responsibility, inclusion, and transparency. They replaced the last two by innovation and trust, which has the definite little fragrance of trying to build some AI crap in there when you tout innovation in 2026 and replacing transparency with trust. It doesn't say the same thing. Transparency means people know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Trust is trust us, bro, which I don't like as an approach. Now, these are very small, nothing burgers taken individually, but we've seen a ton of projects try to slowly move towards more closed versions of their projects, trying to add stuff that people don't want. This generally comes as the CEO of a company changes, which is what happens with Bitwarden right there. They probably smell that there is a potential to make more money, maybe to open up to investors or whatever, and so they're probably trying to jump on the same bandwagon everyone else is doing. We don't have proof of that, but we've had multiple examples in the past, so I totally understand the community's concerns about this. Now, as more vulnerabilities are being disclosed on Linux, probably due to the rise of AI tools detecting those automatically, there's a new solution being proposed to mitigate the impact. We already talked about the kill switch that an NVIDIA developer proposed, which would fully disable some kernel functions. This one is a little bit safer. It's called module jail, and the thing it does is to automatically blacklist unused kernel modules to reduce the potential attack surface. It is a simple shell script that you run once, doesn't run in the background like a daemon. it scans the modules that are currently loaded, it compares them to the list of all available modules, and it creates a modprobe.d file that contains all the unused, unloaded modules, thus blocking them entirely. Now, it doesn't delete them, it doesn't hard remove them, it's using existing kernel systems to actually disable the stuff that you're not currently using. Now, obviously, you should only run that once the system is fully loaded, with all usual hardware plugged in, all the services running, so it doesn't block things that you haven't loaded yet. The thing comes with profiles, one for servers, one for desktops, and a minimal profile that removes almost everything. You can also add a whitelist to state which modules you want to keep, even if they are not loaded at the time you run module jail. And re-enabling modules is pretty simple. You just remove their names from the text file that module jail created in the modprobe.d directory, and you reload the modules using modprobe. I don't think this is a bad idea. It's not exactly the same idea as the kill switch, because the kill switch would disable entire attack path through the Linux kernel's code. This is just through a few modules. There's also the issue that if you run it once, you forget about it, you buy a new peripheral, you plug it in, it doesn't run, and you forgot that this module has been blacklisted automatically, and that you should probably go double check and re-enable it, and for that you need to know the name of the module you need, which is not always extremely easy. Apart from that, I think this is a good hardening tool that you can run mostly on your servers, but also potentially on your workstations if you know nothing is supposed to be plugged in additionally to what is already there. And if you know what you're doing, probably not a bad tool. Microsoft is working on a new Linux distro, which is Azure Linux 4. It is apparently Fedora-based this time. They didn't specifically mention Fedora in their main announcement, but if you look at the README for Azure Linux 4, it indicates that Fedora is an upstream base for that new version. It is described as Fedora plus some overlays and some config files added. The packages are coming straight from Fedora's sources repos. They are being rebuilt and stored, as far as I can tell, on Microsoft's own repos. They are not piggybacking off of Fedora's repos, which would be pretty nasty of them to do. And I think this is interesting because, first, Microsoft has been pushing for a move towards optimized packages for x86 64 v3 in Fedora. They likely want that for their new offerings. And second, Red Hat Enterprise Linux is an official partner of Microsoft on Azure, and Microsoft is now building their own distro using an upstream of Red Hat Enterprise Linux that is already funded by Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So they're using the work paid by one of their partners to create a competitor to the solutions of their partners, which I'm sure will create a little bit of tension. It was always funny to me to see Microsoft relying on Linux for one of their most profitable business units, which is the cloud and Azure. Everything seems above board. They're using their own repos. They're giving proper attribution. They're respecting the licensor as far as I can tell. So they're not doing this in a terrible way, but it's always funny to me to see Microsoft touching Linux after all the previous old comments they made about it. Now, the Linux Vendor Firmware Service, or LVFS, gained another corporate sponsor. This time it is HP. They joined Dell, Lenovo, and Framework as manufacturers that support LVFS and thus pay for the hosting of the firmware that these companies can distribute to all of their devices running Linux, which is pretty nice. They come in as a premier sponsor like Dell and Lenovo, which means they pay $100,000 a year, which is definitely going to help quite a bit. Among other sponsors, the project counts the Linux Foundation and Red Hat, more on the infrastructure side of things, and the Open Firmware Foundation as a startup sponsor on the same level as Framework, both giving $10,000 a year. This is a relatively sizable sum of money. You can do a lot of stuff with $300,000 per year. Might not be enough to fully run the LVFS service, although I would assume if Red Hat and others are already donating servers to the project, maybe this is not so bad. It might also help with development costs. I think this is good. Imagine if our desktop environments had the same level of sponsors. Currently, GNOME and KDE do have some corporate sponsors, but they donate a lot less than $100,000 a year each, and if they had access to that money, it would absolutely supercharge the development efforts of our desktops. The main problem being, for most companies, the money is in building more server-related stuff, more cloud-related stuff. The desktop is very secondary in terms of concern, so it's probably not going to be able to generate the same amount of corporate interest, or at least not at the same levels of funding. Hey, at least we have the Sovereign Tech Fund, which gives big lump sums of money to GNOME and KDE from time to time, which is really good. Now, the Fedora Verified program is apparently moving along. This is a proposed way of identifying trusted contributors for the distro, which would also grant more rights to these contributors, like voting in specific Fedora elections or even running for these elections. They are still toying with this idea and looking how this status could be attributed, on what grounds, what it would grant contributors, and so they ran a little survey among Fedora contributors. For now, people seem to agree that all types of contributions should be taken into account, not just development, not just code, but also marketing, documentation, packaging stuff, all of that. A lot of people also felt it could intimidate new contributors and prevent them from starting to contribute, and people felt the status should not be revoked too quickly. Currently, they're proposing a 12-month period after which your contributions are re-evaluated and it is decided if you keep the verified status or not. People felt 12 months was too short of a time frame because some people just have some event in life. You have a kid, for example, and then all of a sudden you divide by 2,000 the amount of stuff that you could do. More than half of the respondents also felt it was important to show where they were in terms of reaching this status with a progress tracker, although the majority of respondents seem to want a more flexible path to achieve the status, nothing too formal with specific reviews and milestones to hit. Now we'll see if Fedora decides to go ahead with this or not. I do like the idea of rewarding really active contributors with additional bonuses, like maybe participating into elections and stuff like that that might not have been open to them previously. I also do think that there will be two types of reactions to this. First will be some people say, oh, you know what, if I start contributing, I'm gonna have to contribute 10,000 times what I wanted to do just to reach that status. I can't reach it, I'm not even gonna start. Some people might have the other mentality, thinking, hey, I just wanted to get involved a little bit, but this additional goal, this additional status really motivates me to do more. I think you'll see both sides of the story. It all depends on the person's personality. But as long as it doesn't deter people from trying to contribute to the distro or surrounding material, and as long as it doesn't turn into some kind of elite club where only verified people are considered active contributors or useful and everyone else is being lorded over, if it doesn't turn into that, I think I'm cool with it. Some people might have an entirely different reading of that stuff. But no one has a better reading of this message from our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. So Tuxedo makes laptops and desktops that ship to most countries in the world and obviously come with Linux pre-installed. All the hardware that they picked for those devices is specifically meant to run really well on Linux. They actually contribute stuff upstream to make sure that their devices are well supported. They have a big range of computers, whether you want a small, more affordable laptop, all the way up to giant workstations, servers, towers, gaming PCs, you name it. You have a lot of choice for the hardware, a lot of choices for keyboard layouts as well on your laptops, and you can also even choose which logo you want engraved on your laptop, if any. I only use Tuxedo Computers, I can only recommend them, they're really, really good. The link, as usual, is down in the description. Anyway, this will conclude today's video. I hope you enjoyed listening to it, or watching it, even if you did that, you madman. You'll also have a bunch of links in the description, including all the sources for this episode, and also ways to get a daily version of this show for a pretty low monthly price. Thank you all for watching and or listening. Do click all the usual YouTube buttons and the comment section, it really, really helps. And as usual, I guess you'll hear me in the next one. Bye!